It was my pleasure today to convene a meeting of my fellow mayors to discuss the common problems that we have in the future of New York State cities. I am joined here on my left by Mayor Thomas Richards of Rochester, and on my right, Mayor Mike Spano of the city of Yonkers. We also had Mayor Jennings from Albany, who joined us but had to leave early. We convened to talk about our common problems and a way to come up with solutions to the situation that we find cities in New York State in. Part of what we have come away with is that we are going to meet again. We are going to be sharing information to come up with sort of a common set, a definition of the problems that confront all of us. And we will be working throughout the rest of the year to come up with solutions and ideas about how we as mayors move forward in these unprecedented, fiscally challenging times. So with that, let me just ask my Mayor Mike Spano from the Mayor of Yonkers if he'd like that.
Sure.
And
Real quick, let me just say thank you, obviously, to Mayor Richards and to Mayor Minor for hosting this today. This is really an important time for us to be together. Our cities, like the rest of the economy, are facing huge out-year budget deficits. Now, while they will be the responsibility of the mayors and the council to wrestle with, at least from what I've been able to share with my colleagues here, is that in the city of Yonkers, our out years are unbridgeable. We'll take responsibility for them. We will do everything we can to piece the budgets together, but at the end of the day, $500 million over 4 years is something that is extremely difficult for a city like the city of Yonkers for us to be able to deal with. So we have our work cut out for us. We have to get the message out there. We have to remind everyone that we have an increasingly dependent population. We have an increasingly dependent school district. 75% of the children who attend Yonkers schools are at or below the rate of poverty. We have these are real issues. I have the most English language learners by percentage of any of the school districts, including the Bronx in New York State. Again, these are fundamental issues that cost the local taxpayers a lot of money, and they contribute to the overall debt and to the deficit of the city. So we are going to have to come together. We're going to have to lobby together, both here and in Washington, the plight of our cities. How can we move forward? How can we develop ways in which the cities can be helped so that we can move forward economically and in a way that does not chase the middle class out of our town. Again, it's not going to be easy, but I think this is the first step. It's this discussion that we're having about how we can take care of not just the big cities in New York State. As you can see, the big cities across America are facing this problem, and we've decided to be ahead of the curve, and we're going to lobby head on to try and make some changes.
thank you. My colleague to the west, Mayor Richards.
Thank you, and I appreciate, as Mike does, the fact that you've organized this meeting. One of the things we found is the remarkable consistency with respect to the issues that face the cities, our demographics, our financial capacity, and the inability to manage where these two factors are going. And we think there's something fundamental going on here, that goes beyond a bad year or a bad economy, that there's some structural problems in these cities that have arisen over a period of time, and that we're going to have to come up with some different solutions to solve them. This is not just a matter of giving us some more money for a while the economy gets better, or things that have traditionally been done. So it's a difficult problem, but it's a problem we have in common. And we view the Cuomo administration as an ally in this, but we're the mayors. The obligation on us is to come up with a definition of the problem as we see it, and in fact some proposals for how we can solve it. So we start by agreeing that's what we should do, and that we do have this in common, and then over the next several months we're going to be working on the rest of the problem. there's an opportunity here to do something very good. There's an opportunity here to preserve these cities in a financially viable way. After all, they are part of what has driven this state for quite some time, and they're going to continue to be that. And so we do here, I think, have an opportunity to make sure that happens.
With that, I'd open up for questions.
Mayor, I was talking with Mayor Jennings a bit earlier about the fact that all of you have gone through rounds of cuts again and again as you try to deal with the structural deficit. Keeping in mind that that structural deficit isn't going away and you're going to have to continue to make cuts. At what point does it no longer make sense to cut and to just go the route of some type of bankruptcy protection or perhaps calling it a control board?
Well, I think that that is a decision, obviously, that every municipality, every mayor has to answer for himself or herself, along with consulting with their community and their constituents. But what we're trying to do here is to say that that decision and that discussion has to be a very real discussion among our communities, our constituents, and with our leadership. But what we're trying to do is come to the table, define the problem, and also come with some of the solutions so that we can prevent that. But what I will say to you is what I've said before, is if nothing changes, if the same trends hold true, you will find every municipality in New York State faced with that very dire choice, sooner rather than later. This is not something in the long term, this is something that there is an immediacy, at least with the city of Syracuse.
You tried to explain to the state again and again, yourselves as well as the county leaders, town leaders, about the cost of mandates from Albany and the crushing burden that is placed on local governments. And yet, what you've gotten in return, while there has been some reform, there hasn't been sizable reform that you can see a major impact on your budgets. Do you think there's any chance of convincing Albany to do substantial mandate reform?
The answer is yes, I do, or we wouldn't be convening here and talking about this. And I think that there is also an opportunity to go to Washington to talk about Washington and the role that the federal government plays in the health of cities as well. But what we need to be able to do is to communicate and to talk about this information and to share it. And that's what we're going to be doing. And I think that once we do that, you will see that the leadership across the state and in Washington will say, we understand the problem, we want to help be part of the solution. And who better to draft the solution than those of us who are on the ground dealing with the problem?
Mayors, any of you, could you give maybe an example of one of the things you learned from each other today, both about maybe a problem and some sort of solution that you're trying to work toward?
Well, I can tell you that Mayor Richards put on a graph, I guess, a chart on the PowerPoint that showed just how similar our rates of poverty are, just how similar our populations are, our percentages are. So it was remarkable how across different cities we all had the same type of categories and the percentages in there. Particularly striking was the poverty rates that are in each of our cities.
I agree. I think one of the other things that was told to tell me was, you look at our healthcare costs, which are going through the roof. You look at our pension costs, going through the roof. You look at the cost of educating our children. Yonkers, for instance, is a school district that grew by 1,500 students with no real additional aid at all. Again, when a district grows, who suffers? Well, it's the kids in the district, because we don't have the money to continue to drive up additional aid to education locally. So now we have 35, 36, 37 kids in the classroom. And so the classrooms start to blow out. Again, you're talking about children that already have a tough time and are in need of getting the right type of education. And I think that that's something that we have to recognize statewide, that some of our kids who don't make as much money, or maybe not in an affluent adjoining area to a city, are not getting the same opportunity at a good education. And the cities are squeezed beyond belief. So there's no real way of getting additional dollars to these schools. And that's what we're going to have to go to Albany and to Washington for.
one of the things that I think we all shared in this is that, you know, the fundamental revenue source that cities control, and there are differences, but the fundamental revenue source is the real estate property tax. All of us have other sources of revenue, but we don't control really any of them other than that. And I think what was striking about looking at it is all of us have realized for some time, that the solution to this problem will not come from the real estate property tax. In other words, it's neither practical nor fiscally possible to raise the real estate property tax sufficiently to cover this growing gap. And this assumes that we have some successful economic development and we turn around the decline in property values. That's actually already happened in Rochester. So that's what I mean about a fundamental issue here. We all realize that this traditional tool that was available to municipalities like cities is just no longer going to be adequate to deal with this problem. And it's true for all of us.
Mayor, maybe you or the other mayors could talk about this too. In New York State, the burden of pensions in a lot of ways can come down on local governments even more than statewide, especially when the stock market isn't performing well. I mean, barring a return to extremely high stock market returns, I'm sure the city and both of your cities are looking at very high pension costs in the years ahead. How much, I guess the question is, how unsustainable is that for the upstate cities?
Well, it's very unsustainable. It's been exponential growth. We have been using our fund balance to pay for them. This year, we essentially used our spin-up that we got from the state to help pay for them. Other municipalities have been forced to borrow, so-called pension smoothing. We have not had to do that to the extent that other municipalities have. So it is an extraordinarily heavy burden, and one that both legally and morally we have an obligation to meet. We cannot avoid. But the other issue, and Mayor Richards brought this up, healthcare is equally troubling because there is a hope that in the next 5 years pension costs will plateau out. We don't see any hope in the next 5 years that healthcare costs. So over the long run, healthcare costs are going to be probably going to do more damage than pensions are doing right now.
I think our year-to-year increase in pension, I think was, John, 10 million? About 10 million year to year. Now just think about that. In Yonkers, property tax cap is 2%. 2%, every 1% is $2 million. So even if we wanted to pay for those help, for the pension, we couldn't because we were prohibited from doing it because of the tax cap. So again, more of what we need to have in terms of discussion moving forward.
I was going to make exactly the same point. That makes this inadequacy of the resources issue very well. Our bill last year went up by $17 million. The maximum we could increase our taxes is $3.2 million.
What about solutions? We've talked about the problem for a while. When do we start?
Well, these are very complex problems, and they're going to require thoughtful solutions. And I would just say that I don't think it's fair to say, or to the constituents or the people of our communities, okay, well, here's the solution. If it were that easy, we would have done it already. These are, again, take pensions for an example. They are growing at an exponential rate, but we have to pay them under the state constitution. And also, as I said, I think that we have a moral obligation to pay them as well. We have seen our pension bill virtually double in the time that I've been in office. And so how do we come up with an additional $30 million? Well, that's not easy. And how do you come up with an additional $30 million when next year it's going to be $40 million and then 45?
I think this is an exciting first step. I think that the mayors are united, the mayors are together. We're talking about the problems that we share, that we have in common. And that's going to allow us to go, to every editorial board or every newspaper or anyone who's on TV who's willing to watch and listen and give us the idea, give us the ability to go out there and articulate that to the public so that we can get whether it be our friends in the state capitol or in Washington, D.C., to hear our plight and to be helpful. You just look around the country. You see cities across the country are starting to fail. We are going to do everything we can not to be there. We are gonna come up with solutions, and we're gonna work with our state and federal delegation to do that. And we'll also work with the people back at home, whether it be labor, constituents, and our legislative bodies. We're going to do everything we can to right the ship of our cities.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, in the long run, it will be a collective solution. It's not within the capacity, for instance, of any single city's administration to simply solve these problems. It's going to take a collective effort that involves the state, to some extent the federal government, and certainly our employee unions and all of the people who participate in this issue to collectively resolve this so in fact that one group doesn't take a beating on this, which wouldn't be fair. And I think that the first step is to agree that there is a problem, that we're not making this up for some kind of advantage, and the parameters of that problem, so that the discussion that you have is a realistic, rational discussion as much as is possible when tough things are being dealt with, and that the kind of the solutions that you talk about, in fact, get to the problem you agreed you had. And that takes a while in public life. It isn't self-evident in the beginning, and we're working on the big